Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining for the webinar number 5 conducted by PWC's Academy, aimed for the COVID-19 challenges, how leaders can navigate through these challenges. So this is doing our bit to help business professionals and leaders in businesses to navigate through these challenging times, and the insights and some of the tips that they could use to combat these challenges. So my name is Nuan Dishan from PwC's Academy. Today's session is conducted by Raymond Thomas, who's an expert around critical thinking strategies, specifically for leaders. So he has a lot of experience around critical thinking, especially when it comes to the challenging times and the challenging situation. So he has extensive experience delivering sessions around the world. Without a further ado, let me invite Raymond to go ahead with the webinar. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Raymond Thomas, and I want to start off by thanking PwC for inviting me to run this webinar. My goal for the next 45 minutes to 60 minutes is actually to share with you certain concepts in the way that you think and how you could use it more effectively to manage situations within yourself, especially during the COVID times. Just a little bit about myself. I'm based in Singapore, so we are coming live from Singapore right now. I've been involved in this topic of critical thinking probably for the last 12 years, where I've had the opportunity to reach out to organizations, to leaders, to companies, to government bodies, and help them and their people develop effective skills in critical thinking. Prior to that, I worked with 3 multinational organizations where all 3 were Americans, and one of the things that I actually gained from them is basically the skills to push myself, especially from a cognitive perspective, so that I was able to challenge the thoughts that I have, not always look at the same set of thoughts, but constantly reviewing the thoughts I have, the biases that I have, the assumptions that I have, challenging them and looking for new ways how to get things done. That's actually has become very, very useful, especially right now when the whole world is actually in the midst of managing, of getting out as far as the COVID-19 situation is concerned. Even in Singapore, I guess if you read and if you watch the news, the international news, you realize that the Singapore government is doing a lot of things to basically help individuals, to help the business, and also look at what we call non-pharmaceutical interventions, NPI, in terms of getting people to practice things like social distancing, so that we could try to suppress a lot of things that's happening around us. So that's a little bit about myself. I've been to Colombo, compliments of PwC, and I've run this program on critical thinking. So what you're going to be hearing today is not the full version of what we do over 2 days, but it is an abridged version of what we do over those 2 days. And I'm going to be touching on just some final points that I think would be valuable for people, for you, especially when you are thinking about things. And there are certain things that you need to take into consideration. If you're familiar with this whole platform, I just wanted to share with you that how I'm going to be running this webinar today is probably going to be a little bit different from what you may be used to. I believe in engagement. I believe in interactivity between myself, the facilitator, and yourself out there. So I'm going to ask you if you could use the chat functions that is available on Click Meeting. And I also will be using other engagement tools where you can actually post questions. And I'm going to take your questions, and I'm going to make this whole webinar as useful as it is for you. So rather than I tell you what you need to do, but I'm going to use your examples. I'm going to use your questions and try to answer some of the points that you have and how critical thinking could be useful to help to get you to think a little bit more. I hope that is okay. Some are coming in and saying hello. Thank you very much for coming in and saying hello. So if it's okay with everybody's permission, I would like to move on. And I'm going to start off by asking you to share a little bit more. And we all know that everyone is exposed to this whole COVID-19 situation. But what's more important is I would like to know from you. I have a question here which I'd like to pose to you. And what you need to do in this question is, if you look at the screen right now, there is a QR code. If you could take your mobile phone or any other mobile gadgets that you have, if you could scan the QR code, it takes you to a link called www.mentime.com. If you go in there, you key in the code 1587. I've asked a question, and that is, what is one word that describes how you are feeling today? And your answers are going to go into a word cloud, and I'm going to share with you in a few minutes the answers that you are putting in. So while you're scanning the code and you're going into www.mentime.com and typing in the code to get in, I am going to start the session right now. All right. So if you're putting in information, I would be seeing that information appearing on my screen, and then I'm going to be sharing that screen with you. So if I could ask you to do that right now, give you maybe about a couple of minutes. So once again, take out your mobile phones. If you have an iPhone, then just take the phone, the camera function, turn it on, and go in there and fill out the information. It's amazing. I'm already seeing some of these answers, and I'm going to be sharing some of these answers for you. And I'll even share with you what the majority of you are actually feeling. So let me share my screen with you. I'm going into screen sharing. And here comes the word cloud. Okay. I hope you can see the word cloud in front of you. I'm sharing the screen. If you look at the word cloud, the question here, again, for those who have come in and answered, thank you so much. You can still answer more than once and put down what are your feelings. And the bigger the words are, there are more people feeling or resonating in the same way as what is happening for you. So if you look at the words out there, the three biggest words, as you can see, that for those who are sitting in this webinar, most people are either feeling hopeful, stressed, and anxious, because those are the three biggest words. As you can see, exhausted is another word that is coming up. So this is great. Keep putting in the words. Whatever word that comes to you that you want to put in there, That's great. But you can see it's toggling between hopeful, anxious, and stressed, right? So from exhausted, we are now come out to stressed itself. Some people are feeling great. That is really good. It's amazing. But thank you so much for sharing those words in terms of how you are feeling. And I'll explain to you why I put this up, or why I'm asking you this question. Typically, I've taken it off screen sharing right now, so I'm going back to presentation. Okay, there you are. And you can keep entering it. I'm not going to close. I'm not closing the screen, so you can keep entering right to the end of it, and I can share with you more in terms of what words come out. Right now, still the 3 words that are coming out is hopeful, anxious, stressed, and probably even great. So I'm going to use the whiteboard and put down some of the words that is appearing. Right. So text. So I'm going to write down the words. The words are right now that I see on my screen is hopeful. I see anxious. I see stress. And maybe the smaller word that I see is great. So I'm going to put this up, except, all right? So these are the words that are actually appearing. These are the words that are actually appearing on the word cloud. I will share the word cloud with you again towards the end of the session. And I hope those who are feeling anxious and stressed, hopefully by the end of it, you would start looking at things a little bit more different. All right? So if that's okay, I'm going to move on. But I just wanted to share with you the way that you feel right now is highly dependent on how the heart wires are actually laid out in your brain. All right. If you grew up from a point where you are always feeling stressed in the environment that you grew up, be it in church, be it at home, be it anywhere at all, then you probably would resonate with that feeling right now. So those who are feeling anxious and stressed, you're probably grown up with that, and that's why you continue to feel that. There is nothing wrong in feeling that. All right. So I want to make sure that that is clear. But it all comes back to the whole element of how you're feeling up here in your head itself, how cognitively you are feeling. So I want to move on from this whole element of feeling to the next level, where I want to ask you another question. And I want you to think about this, because I'm going to get you guys to think about what I'm going to share with you in a more cognitive manner. All right. So have a look at this screen that's coming up in front of you. I guess all of you can see that screen that's in front of you. All right. And for those who don't know, that is the Antarctica. All right. Which is one of the coldest places in the world. And what I'd like you to do is come with me on a journey right now. And I want you to imagine that you are on a research mission to Antarctica. All right. And you're standing there and you're looking at what's in front of you. And there's cold wind that's blowing at your face. And as you track the snow, there's nothing ahead, but all you can see is just miles and miles of ice and water. There's no humans to interact with. All right. There is no internet services. There's no data plan. There is no Wi-Fi. Just you, and probably if you look out there, you will see the penguins for days at a time. That's all you're going to be seeing. So in the beginning, your thoughts come to you as if they are like birds flying in every direction, right? So just like birds flying. So you have all kinds of thoughts. What I'd like you to share with me is, what do you think would be the likely questions that are going through your mind? So what kind of questions are actually going through your mind? And what I'd like you to do is actually, if you could collaborate with me a little bit and put down what these questions are, probably in the chat section. So go into the chat section and share with me, what are some questions that's going through your mind? I mean, you're standing there and all you see is coldness. Huh? You're really, really cold. You're seeing snow. The winds are blowing. What kind of questions are going through your mind? So I'm going to give you just a few minutes, and if you could type some of those questions down. I'm just getting you guys to think a little bit more. Sharon, is there a way for us to give them a screen and then they can collaborate and put down their answers? Oh, what kind of research? Research on the penguins, or research on the weather. Oh, you know what? Research on climate. All right, research on the climate itself, and you're trying to understand what the climate is like, and you know, how global warming is affecting. So, what kind of questions do you think are going through your mind? I see someone just wrote disaster. I've got how to secure shelter and food. Nice. I'm trying to see whether I can make them. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, I can't. Can I be friends with the penguin? That's interesting. That was one of the questions. I'm trying to see how to, can I see it in questions? Show question list. Oh, I can't. Oh, there you are. I'm seeing a lot of these coming up. Fantastic. Somebody asked me, there you are. What is beyond the mountains? All right, interesting question. Here's another one. Can I be friends with the penguin? Thank you, Gayatri. Interesting question too. Planning out what needs to be done each day. Okay, survival mode. Here's another one. Where do you land? Here's another question. How many miles more to sail to reach where I want to go? Here's another one. What if the rescue team is not able to come back to get us on time? Yeah, it's amazing, huh? What goes through your mind. Why is it too gloomy? Why is it so gloomy? And here's another one. How to chase away a polar bear. Now, it's really interesting, all these different questions that are coming about. And here's another one more. How should I manage time? All right. So you realize there's another one that just came up is, do we have enough food? So you realize that the way we are thinking actually in some way or another is aligned to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it always goes back to your basic physiological needs. Some of you were asking, do we have enough food, right? How am I going to communicate? How am I going to communicate with the penguins, right? So I'm looking at my physiological needs first before I go to my next level in terms of my safety. Where am I going to go? What if they don't come back and pick me up? Why did I get on this job? Yeah, right. I mean, these are all different elements that we look at, and I think what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show you how you are starting to think on a deliberate basis, so that you can come up with certain answers. I just got another situation. It says, can I claim this land and rule over it? Very interesting. Huh? All right. So you see how we all have different ways of thinking. And all this thinking happens inside our head. All right. So it's a whole effort of how do I think? How do I process information? How do I think? How do I process information? How do I evaluate what is important to me before I even jump out there and I take actions? All right. So let me do that just very quickly. So it's about how do I think? How do I prioritize what is important to me? So we use like the Maslow's hierarchy of need. For those who are familiar with it, we look at our food needs. We need our shelter needs before we think about safety. The third thing is we evaluate and then we decide what is the next step that we are going to be doing. And that's exactly the model that I'm going to be showing you in a little bit itself. I'm going to move on to the next slide. In my next slide, I wanted to create the context a little bit. I think it's important for us to understand the context of this talk so that you understand how you can use the information that we're going to be talking about. The first thing I want to say is the first point there, that thinking is an inside job. What does it mean by thinking is an inside job? Well, thinking happens inside of you, all right? And why is that important? Because it is important because it helps you to think about things in a different way. All right. So we have all these hard wires that run through our head, and the hard wires basically help you to think in a certain way. Why are some people feeling stressed? Why are some people feeling anxious? Because it doesn't go in the same way as how your heart wires are formed in your head itself. All right? So thinking is an inside job. It is something that you have to think in order for you to make your business more effective. So where does it originate? It originates in your head. I have another model which I don't have it here to show to you, but I always say that thinking starts at the bottom of the pyramid. All right? It's only when you think that you can go ahead and solve problem. If you can solve problem, you can manage your ambiguity. If you can manage ambiguity, you can think strategically. So if you think about it from a pyramid perspective, right? Thinking is the basis. Thinking is the fundamental to problem solving, to decision making, to managing ambiguity, to strategic thinking. So what we are talking about today is back to the basics of how we think. So any thoughts that we have, once again, if you feel anxious, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling hopeful, it all starts from up here. All right? So please remember that. And what we do is we collaborate with other people in terms of thinking through things before we come up with a solution that helps to grow the business or helps to manage the business more effectively. That's the first context. The second context that I want you to keep in mind is thinking is not always about answering questions, but it's about questioning answers. Let me repeat that. All right. Thinking is not always about answering questions. So if people ask you a question, yes, it's for you to answer that question, but it's also for you to think about why is the person asking that question. So it's not always about answering questions, but it is also about questioning the answers that is actually given to you. All right? So ask yourself, the next time someone is asking you a question, why are they asking you that question? And it's always really powerful in thinking that you ask questions. And especially right now, when we talk about COVID-19, right? We see all these messages coming through your mobile messages, right? You are in different chat groups. And in every single chat group, people are saying different things. And sometimes you don't even know if what they're saying is truthful or is fake. For some of us, we take the message and we start running. And guess what happens? We feel anxious, we feel stressed. But if we stop for a while and ask questions, is this message true or fake? What do I need to do about that message? What actions do I need to take so that, number one, I protect myself, number two, I protect my family, number three, I protect my business? The third point in the context is clear internal structures of processing information. What does that mean? Well, that basically means logical thinking. You need to ask yourself the question, are you logical in how you are processing information? And logic is, this relates to the next one. How does this one relate to the next one? If there is no link between 1 and 2, then there is no logic to it. And that's where probably a light in your head lights up and says that, you know, what is the relationship between one point and another point? In order for thoughts to be formed, in order for information to be processed, there must be clear linkages between one component and another component, right? Give you an example. In Colombo, you have traffic lights. You have red light, you have green light, and you have orange light. If you see a red light, what do? That is logic. So if you see a red light, I am supposed to stop, and that is my logic. When you have green light, what do? Oh, when it's green light, I will go. So that's another clear logic to it. Hang on. What if you have orange light? What do? And I bet you that most of you will think in different ways. Some of you would say, oh, if it's orange, I will go faster so that I can beat the orange light. Some of you say, oh, if it's orange, I will press the brakes and I will stop. Some of you would say, oh, if it's orange, I will go slowly and then decide whether I want to escape the light or do I want to stop. Right? So all that logic is actually packaged in your brain in terms of how you decide whether you want to proceed or you don't want to proceed. And I just use the traffic light as a simple example in terms of how you can manage logic in your head. So it's the same thing. Even if you run a business, especially right now, what are some business decisions that you need to think about and you need to be clear about before you can take, you can make a decision? All right. So that's another thing that needs to be really important as far as the way that you think. So you realize it all comes back to point number one. Point number one, and let me see how I do this. Drawer. All right. It always comes back to point number one, and that is point number one being thinking an insider job. So it's for you to always think about that. I would like to go to the fourth point on the context. The fourth point is also, I'm going to share with you certain standards that our brain gets exposed to before when we take in information. All right? So taking in information is an important component in thinking. We take information by seeing, by smelling, by tasting, by listening, and also by feeling. All right, so there are different ways we take information, and when we take that information, there are certain guidelines that I talk about, which I call the thinking standards. I will tell you a little bit about the thinking standards today, but if you want to know more, I would highly encourage you to attend my session whenever PWC is organizing it. All right. So the reason why we look at all these contexts is so that we can constantly look at how we develop new mindsets so that we can produce different results. So whatever that used to work before COVID-19 may not work during COVID-19, let alone work after COVID-19. Okay, I want you to keep that in mind. Whatever that worked before COVID-19 may not work during COVID-19. You may have to redesign, you may have to re-engineer, you may have to break it down and recreate before it can even work for you post-COVID-19. And always results start with up here. How you think about it differently, and when you think about it differently, you take different actions, and when you take different actions, you produce different results. Right? So I hope that clarifies some of the fundamentals itself. So I'm going to open up the second screen where I would like you to put some questions in before I come back to the deck and start going through some additional material. So it's already 1 o'clock. Amazing. What is the next question? The next question is here. I hope this is valuable to you. And if you think it's valuable to you, please, give me a thumbs up or let me know that everything is going good for you. If you agree, give a thumbs up. If you disagree, give a thumbs down. And what I'd like you to do right now is, what questions do you have related improving your thought processes? So go back to menti.com and use the code 1587 again. And I am going to open up the next screen, which basically asks you the question, what questions do you have related to improving your thought process? So while you're putting some of these questions in, I'm going to be moving on to the next part in terms of my deck itself. By the way, thank you so much for those who are participating in the chat and giving me some inputs. It's interesting how some people say when it's orange, you slow down. But while other people might say when it's orange, you go faster, right? So it's different. It's all just different thoughts. And no one is wrong because we have all constructed the wires in our head in different ways. So I'm going to show you, leave you with this screen. So if you could go in there, I've only got one question so far, but that's all. I'm sorry. I've got more questions coming up. I am going to show you the questions, and then I'm going to try to answer the questions as I carry on with my presentation. Give me a minute, and I am going to show you the questions. Oh, wonderful. Here comes the questions. I just want to show you what are some of the questions. So your question could be up here. Nice. There you go. I guess you guys can see this, huh? And there, gosh, okay. So here are some of the questions. I'm going to reload my page in a little while. How do I prepare for a calm and focused mindset? How do I condition the mind to focus? Amazing. How do I separate the unuseful thoughts from the useful thoughts? How do I rewire my brain thinking patterns? How can I stay active during this time? When you have a multitask on so many items, what methods exist to focus on the most relevant task at hand? How to think clearly? Should there be a change in your thought process given the change in landscape. Incredible, incredible. Keep those questions coming. I'm going to try to take some of those questions as I'm going through it. This is amazing. Let me see. Let's. I want to pause this, and then I wanted to go up here again. Resume. Can I go up? Sucks. All right, it's going up. All right, okay. I'm gonna put these questions. You can keep these questions coming. I'm going to try to answer some of these questions, probably through the model. Were you able to see the questions? Oh, I wasn't sharing the screen. I apologize. I wasn't sharing screen. Okay, here you are. Now I'm going to be sharing my screen. Can you see the screen? I hope you can see my screen. Look at all these questions. What should be focused at this point of time? How to think clearly? How do I rewire my brain patterns? How do I condition the mind to focus? Gosh, I have to say, and I want to come back to my presentation, and I'll try to answer some of the questions that's coming up here. I think all the questions that you have, I think, are great questions. If you're asking me, I am also trying to change my thinking patterns as I'm going through COVID-19. Can you do it? The answer is yes, you can do it. But before you can even do it, the first important thing that you must be aware of, and this is great, it goes into my next slide. Let me show you my next slide. Okay. Oh, this is amazing. So it doesn't work. Okay, sorry guys. Can you see 1, 2, 3, 4 right now? Okay. The animation doesn't work on this slide. I just realized it. So I'm going to go through the points if you can. All right. So if you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, this is how your brain processes information. Okay, so all your questions that you actually put up, how do I focus? What if I'm multitasking? Can I change the way that I think? The answer to everything is yes, you can. In the last 10 to 15 years, brain scientists have found that our brain can go through things called neuroplasticity, which basically means that you can change the way that you think. It doesn't matter how young you are or how old you are. Okay, the only thing is it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of work, it takes habit, it takes training to do it, but more importantly, I think it takes these 4 ways to do it. So let me tell you what these 4 ways are. And I'm going to write it out on the screen. By the way, thank you so much for all the questions that's coming up. I will share the questions with you. I will share the word cloud with you towards the end of the session. Here, I'm going up to the screen. No, I want to go to the whiteboard. So what you saw just now, okay, text. I am going to put down what does 1, 2, 3, 4 stand for. 1 in my slide earlier is observe. Number 2 in my slide earlier is interpret. 3 in my slide earlier is evaluate. And number 4 in my slide earlier is decide. I hope you can see that. All right. So those are the 4 points. Let me see if I can highlight this draw. All right. So these 4 points, if you're trying to solve the problem or the questions that you're asking me, these are the 4 things that you need to start thinking about it. And it's got to be done in a conscious way. All right. So the word I said was you got to be conscious or you got to be deliberate. Let me write that down. I said deliberate versus intuitive. Okay. These 2 are different things. So right now, most of you are in this state. You are in an intuitive state. When you go through these four processes of observe, interpret, evaluate, and decide, it is an element of being deliberate. So it is as simple as, let me come back here, it is as simple as noticing a thought, right? I take an example in terms of one of the questions that came up. The question asked me, how can I stay focused? How do I stay focused? I want to, and let me use the example of what I have in front of me. I want to read a book. So for me to read a book, I need to focus on what is in the book. But you realize that your brain can get hijacked some of the ideas of you focusing and reading the book. So I want you to be aware when your brain gets hijacked into something else as compared to reading the book. That is the first point of Whiteboard, of observing. Does that make sense? All right. So when you see your mind drifting, when you see that you focus and you want to do one thing, but your mind kind of shifts, that is a point of observing that your mind is shifting. So how do you overcome if you're really distracted? One of the questions that came up is, what if you get distracted very easily? Some of the things that I do and many people recommend is being mindful, is meditating. So I'm not sure how many of you meditate, but I think meditation is a great way to bring your thoughts focused on what you want to focus on as compared to what you don't want to focus on, right? So let's come back to your thoughts again. So in any of your thoughts, you want to observe, you want to interpret, you want to evaluate that thought before you even decide what you want to do. So one example, I don't feel motivated right now. So I want you to observe that thought. I'm not feeling motivated. So what does that mean for you? It means that, oh gosh, I feel really down. So I need to evaluate it. So what? You know, if I feel really down, so what and now what? So ask yourself these questions. If you remember the concept earlier that I mentioned, it's not always about answering questions, but it's about questioning answers. All right? So ask yourself, so what? Now what? So this is what you do when you are in this stage. Can I highlight, draw, pointer? Okay, I can't. Oh, yes, I think I can, but I can't. All right. So when you are at the evaluate, so point number 3, if you see point number 3, I want to highlight. Oh, yes, I can highlight. I'm just excited that I can do some of these things. All right. Oh, I can't. All right. So the third part is looking at evaluating. So when you have to evaluate, you ask these questions. Let me see if I can ask, write down a couple of questions you can put in. So text. All right. So you ask this. You can ask 3 questions. One is the what, the so what, and now what? All right. So these are 3 questions that you can ask, especially with evaluate stage. Can I draw a line? I can draw a line. Fantastic. So this is the question that you ask. Oops. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So for evaluate, these are the 3 questions that you want to look. Ask yourself, what is it that you feel? So what, you feel this? Now what are you going to do? All right. Same thing to adapting to situations. If you have a situation, you need to adopt the situation, observe and look at what the situation is, interpret what the situation means to you, then evaluate what, so what, and now what? And then you decide in terms of what action you want to take. All this puts you in a state of what you see on the whiteboard here, which I call deliberate. All right. So this is what we call, deliberate. Sorry, my drawing is not really that good. I'm gonna use that. Okay, and I want to use. Okay, so that's good. So I hope that makes sense to you. So what I've shared with you is I've already shared with you 3 things. One is, in any kind of situation, look at these 4 points. Observe, notice, be aware of what is happening. Interpret the situation, be it positive, be it negative. Interpret it. Then evaluate it using these 3 questions of what, so what, and now what, before you decide what do you want to do next. All right? And this is a process of being deliberate. All right? I hope that makes sense to you guys. Coming back to my slide right now. So that's one thing I want to share with you. I want to share 2 more things with you, but let me talk a little bit about this one. I don't know how many of you, one of the things that I've been trying to do is I've been trying to help people in terms of recognizing fake news. You guys understand what fake news is, right? Somebody just asked me a question. I'll come back to that question. Good question. I do not know what to prioritize. I'll come back to that question in a little while. So how do you recognize fake news? Here's some examples in terms of how to recognize fake news, because I think a lot of people that I see are anxious. A lot of people that I see are anxious. They are stressed. Oops. They are stressed. Sorry, I just got an error somewhere else. They are stressed, or they are anxious, or they're stressed, right? And why? Because more and more the fake news is actually affecting a lot of people. All right. So here are a couple of things that you want to try, you want to take into consideration if this is important. If this is important to you. All right. But the last thing I wanted to share with you too, earlier that I mentioned, is the standards. All right. So if you remember the 4 steps, do you remember what was the first one? Right. The first one was observing. So you use your 5 senses to observe. But when you observe, sometimes information may not be clear to you. So these are standards that I use in my workshop. And please come join us at the workshop, because I have to tell you, it is transformational when you're able to think differently from how you are normally thinking. Because remember, today it's not normal times. All right, it is abnormal times. So because it is abnormal times, we need to start thinking in different way. We need to start observing data. We need to start perceiving data in different ways. And that's why we have these 9 standards that I put together. And one of the things I do is I coach people too. But these are the 9 things that I actually look for. And if any of this is not clear, I will question answers. So the 9 standards here are examples like clarity, accuracy, precision in the information. So if I'm working with someone and the person is not clear, I will ask them questions. All right, let me see if I can draw this. Yeah. All right, if it's not clear, I will ask them questions. If the information is not accurate for me, or I want to know the source, I will ask them question. If the information is not precise for me, I will ask questions. So every time any of these standards are violated when I'm talking to people, I will ask them questions. And I'm not saying you can't ask your supervisors questions. I actually encourage you to ask supervisors questions, because I think it's important for us to ask these questions so that we can understand what the real situation is, and we can react towards that situation that situation itself. All right. So here's another one. Logic is another one. I always look for logic. Logic is another element. I always look for how important. So priority. Someone asked me. Oh, fantastic. Okay. Yes, yes. Coming there, coming there. We are bombarded with information. So do we filter the relevant information? Yes. And I think it's really important for you to understand what is relevant and what is non-relevant. And in some cases, in our little mind, we don't know what is relevant and not relevant. And sometimes we have to go to other people and ask them. We have to go to our supervisors and ask them, is this information relevant for us? Is this information not relevant for us? And this is where the whole element of what I call metacognition. Oh my God, I'm giving you a lot of new words today. What did I say? I'm going to type this out. The word that I use. And by the way, guys, I would highly encourage you, what you could do is go Google these words after this session so that you understand a little bit more about thinking and critical thinking. How do I move this? Pointer. Can I move this? Oh, yes, I can. All right. So it's metacognition. And what does metacognition mean? Metacognition basically means, gosh, all right, it's gone. What happened? All right, that's all right. I'm going to write it down. Okay. I'm going to put it up here. I said metacognition. And what does it mean? It means thinking about thinking. Yay. I know. How does that help you? So if you're bombarded with information, you have to think about what you're thinking about the information that you have. You have to make a decision. Is this important? This is not important. I can't tell you what is important or what is not important because you work in your own organization. You work in the context of the organization. What is important to them is probably what your supervisors and what your bosses can tell you that is really important to them. All right. So I think I've given you a lot of information today, and I want to be really sensitive in terms of what I give you. But here's the thing: if you're interested, if you're more curious, that's another thing. Is make sure that you're curious during the COVID-19. Be as curious as possible so that you can explore how to move things itself, how to go and create new ideas itself. Great. Let me go back to my presentation and see. So yeah, that's the thing. If you remember this, we started off by looking at this picture, and remember what I said. I said, if you're out there alone, what kind of questions keep going through your head? I think it's only natural, it's only normal for your questions to keep flowing in your mind. It is only natural. And let me tell you, if it's not flowing in your mind, then there's something seriously wrong. So I want you to think about how you look at your different thoughts. Just remember, you don't need to entertain every thought that comes through your head. You need to prioritize. You need to know which thought is important, which thought is not important. And then ask questions like, what is it? So what? Now what? And then make a decision and move with it. So for those who are asking me questions in terms of how do you look at relevant information, go back to my 4 steps, right? If you remember what my 4 steps are, the first one was observe. Second one, interpret the data. Third one, evaluate the data. So what? Now what? And last one is to make decision. So just use that little model that I'm giving you and to try that, to integrate that into your whole life, especially when you're trying to manage COVID. And don't get just too sucked up with whatever else that's happening all around you. All right? And with that, that's all I have for right now. I'm going to entertain some of your questions. Okay, I'm going to put some of these questions up here so that you can see for yourself. Present. I need to share my screen. Screen sharing. Okay, screen sharing. Okay, screen sharing. I'm putting some of the questions up here so you could actually see the questions, and you know, let's see how we can answer that. I don't want to sound like an someone who's always positive, but I'm very, very optimistic to say a lot of these questions that are coming up can be worked on. Just remember one thing, there are no immediate solutions when it comes to your brain, right? The way you change your thoughts, the way you change your heart wires, the way you create habits, all take time, all right? So when you ask about how to think clearly, thinking clearly, well, remember the 4 steps I gave you. That is just one way of doing it. Come to the workshop. I will create a 7-step process for you so that you understand. You can actually step through every single step of the phase, every phase of the step. Huh? All right. How can I stop getting distracted? That's one question that I just saw coming out. How do you stop getting distracted? One way of doing that is mindfulness and meditation. I am so serious about it. It's just about being mindful and meditate. Let me tell you how I do it. And I'm going to move the screen out, and the screen is there. All right. So one of the ways I recommend in terms of doing meditation and mindfulness, what I do is I have an Apple Watch. If you look at that, so Apple Watch has got one program that's called Breathe, and one thing that they do is they tell you to breathe every certain times. What happens is you get a trigger, you get an alert, and asks you to breathe only for 1 minute. And I think it's a great, powerful way for you to just sit down and try to focus in terms of your breath. That's one way of doing it. It's not just 1 minute a day, but I do it in probably multiples of 1 for 5 to 10 times, which is 10 minutes. All right. So those are some of the things that you can actually, the more you're able to control, the less distracted you become, the more focused you become in terms of what you need to do. Can you please send us the session? Okay, I am not sure what you mean. I'm going to Q&A mode. So if anybody's got questions in terms of Q&A mode, I'm going to pop out the questions. So this was one of the things that came up in terms of Q&A mode. You can't see it because there you are. All right, so this is one of the questions that came up. We are bombarded with information, so how do we filter the relevant information? I can't tell you what's the relevant information. I think what is relevant to you is probably determined by your supervisors, by your bosses, by your leaders, and people in the organization who will tell you, yes, this information is important, no, this information is important. You have to understand this is not 100% proof way of doing things. COVID-19, the last time a similar plague happened like COVID-19 was during the Spanish flu in 1918. All right. So there were many things that were done then. And believe it or not, those are exactly the things that we are doing right now. So many of you are putting down WFH, work from home. Well, a lot of that was because of what I called the non-pharmaceutical intervention, the NPI method. That means social distancing, staying away from crowds, or all different ways. Now, how did that become a relevant information? Because it's something that worked in the past, back in 1918, when the Spanish flu was going on. So it's not someone just wakes up and says, yes, this is what we have to do. But you realize it's the tinkering of minds of different people when they get together and they decide what works and what doesn't work. Here's another question. I do not know what to prioritize. I share with you a story. When I used to work for corporate, one of the things I used to do is I worked together in a team, and we created criteria like cost, criteria like creativity, different criteria to evaluate the problems that we are trying to solve. I would then go to my boss and say, boss, based on these criteria, which is also my priority, I have decided that I want to go this way. My boss would turn around and say, you know what? I disagree with your criteria. I disagree with your priority. And then what I would do is I would ask my boss, tell me what your priorities are. And then I would take that priority and I go back to my team and work with my team to come up with a decision. So priorities, even though what we think is a priority today may not be a priority tomorrow. And that's the whole part about how the world is moving very, very fast right now. So how do we prioritize? You know, it's a dynamic thing. It's not a static thing. COVID-19 is dynamic. There are no experts for COVID-19. I always tell people, we don't have experts. All of us are learning to become experts in the time of COVID-19. Yes, I know you focus on too many, and I guess that's where you need to put down your whole list and prioritize. I'll tell you frankly, like for me, I work from home. Every day, I only give myself 3 things to complete. Right? I got so many things, but I only give myself 3 things because I know these 3 things are important to me right now. Right? So sometimes we have so many things in our mind, we have to think about how to focus itself. Great. I'm going to stop here for the time being. If anybody's got questions, my recommendation is, please come see us, or please talk to us, or please talk to the team at PWC. And if there is a way for us to support you, we will definitely support you either through an in-house program or even a public program or even doing some kind of a coaching. I do run coaching from Singapore where we can actually organize sessions to that. And that's all I have. Thank you very much, guys.